Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today's episode, we are going to work on and hopefully knock out the braking system on the Supra. So, in my jegs bags here, I have all the different components. There's a proportioning valve, have some other fittings, so on and so forth. And there should be, the other bags are right here, but all the other fittings and line and things of that nature are all here. They're in theory all here, and I can go ahead and get all these brake lines made, get fluid in the master, and hopefully have brakes by the end of the day. So the first thing I need to do is tighten down this adapter plate right here, and then I'll go ahead and I'll locate the line lock solenoid wherever I can fit it. And I want to keep all of the lines underneath of the master cylinder, so that way this is the highest portion of the braking system, and similar to bleeding a coolant system, or a cooling system rather, if all the lines are below that highest fill point, then it makes it that much easier to bleed the system. But we'll worry about that later. For now, let me go ahead and get this adapter plate tightened down, and then we can keep rocking from there. After some drilling, painting, and riv nutting, the line lock solenoid is now in place. So you can see it right here, and I'll still have to terminate the wires, but I'll wait to do that until I get the rest of this situated, as I don't want to cause any obstructions that are unnecessary. So quick little explanation slash tech tip. What a line lock solenoid is a solenoid that will maintain pressure in whichever calipers, whichever portion of the braking system that you have it hydraulically tied to. So typically what you'll see is in a drag car or a rear-wheel drive drag car, that solenoid will be placed on the front axle, so the front two calipers. So you pump the pedal, hit the solenoid button, and it will hold pressure in the front brakes while releasing it in the rear, giving you the ability to do a burnout that is unresisted. So pretty simple little setup, and pretty simple the way they work, but it is a very necessary part of a car like this. So now that I know this is in its position, it's where I want it to be, I can pull it back out. I can put PTFE or Teflon tape on the two adapter fittings, tighten those down, and then we'll be ready to start on the front brake lines. Adapter fittings are in place, and I put hose ends on the inlet and outlet of the line lock solenoid, just so that way I can start building the lines. So I guess now would be a good time to talk about PTFE lines and the differences between them and a normal AN line. So everything is a little bit different with them, but for good reason. So here's the anatomy of one of the hose ends. You have the 90-degree hose end itself. You have the olive, or the actual little crush sleeve, and you have the nut, and then the line itself. And if you can see inside of the line, maybe if this thing isn't extremely blurry, but inside of the braiding you can see there's actually a plastic liner inside of there. So you are creating a crush or a compression fitting essentially to that inside plastic liner, and this essentially alleviates the possibility of a fluid leak if you do it correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and assemble this fitting onto the end of this hose here, and that will allow me to go ahead and make the first line from the master cylinder to the line lock solenoid, and then we can keep moving forward from there. Alright, so I have the little nut slid over our braided stainless section, and I went ahead and I took my vibrant shears and I squared the end of it up, and these end up being counterintuitive to the way that you normally put an AN line together. Now when you put a normal line together, you don't want any fraying of the actual metal braided portion, but with one of these little compression fittings, that's exactly what you're after. So you can see I have this little screwdriver, and I'm going through and actually pushing the braided stainless section out, so that way I can slide the little olive or the compression sleeve around the plastic portion of the line without getting any of the braided stainless on the inside of it. Because if you do that, you won't get an effective crimp, for lack of a better description, with that this little compression sleeve, and you run the risk of losing brake pressure or whatever pressure that you're working with, and that is not a good thing. So I have all the braided stainless pulled away. I'll go ahead and just put it on the table, rock it around so I bottom out the plastic on the inside of the olive. And we are almost there. Alright, once you have your olive in place, then it's simply a matter of putting the other pieces together. So this nipple on the end of the hose end goes inside the PTFE liner, and then the nut simply slides up around there, and as you tighten this down, the compression fitting does its thing and squeezes everything together to create a fluid tight seal. So I'll go ahead and tighten this down, and then we can figure out the length that we need to cut the line to, get the other side put in place, and at that point we'll be cooking with fire. The front brake lines are completed, but we ran into a little bit of a snag. So all of the straight hose ends that I have, or that I had at this point, they all stripped out. So I'm really not happy with the quality control that was utilized in making those hose ends, but I digress. It doesn't make any sense to whine and complain about it now, and we can go ahead and make this work, I guess. So now that the fronts are done, I need to move on to the rears. So rears need to put this proportioning valve in and try to make this work with all 90-degree hose ends. And I should still have enough here, hopefully. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I think that should be enough because I already have 2 down on the splitter in the lower part of the firewall where the lines begin to run towards the rear of the car. So let me go ahead, get the proportioning valve unboxed, get the adapter fittings put in it, and then we can figure out A, where to mount it, and B, how we're going to run lines to it. And a couple more holes, a couple more rib nuts, and we have a mounted proportioning valve. So obviously need to put the master cylinder, it's right there, back in its home, and then we can get to work on these rear brake lines. So let me go ahead and do that, and we'll keep chugging right along. I almost reached a hard stop point as the materials that I had gotten for these brake lines there were a couple pieces missing. And it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And I was missing another T-fitting to split the rear portion of the brake lines to go to each of the connections to the splitter going to the back of the car. However, I was able to find my old proportioning valve and a splitter, as well as a couple of the lines. So what I'm going to do is obviously harvest this splitter, or harvest this T-fitting rather, and I'm going to harvest these two lines as they have straight hose ends on them that are not destroyed. So I can take one side of these and cut one of these straights off and put a 90 on each end, and that will get me what I need as far as these lines go. And I can pull the 90s that I have on the bottom side of the car that are already threaded onto the splitter down there. I can pull those off, I can put those on one side of these lines, and all will be well. So let me go ahead and get some of the stuff shuffled around, get these lines made, and we'll pretty much be wrapped up with the brake lines at that point. After a long, sweaty, frustrating day, the brake lines are now completed on the Supra. So here's what we ended up with. And the front of the master cylinder goes to the front brakes. The rear goes to the rear. And we have our proportioning valve right there. We have our line lock solenoid down there. And the line lock solenoid still needs to be wired. Russ left me the pigtail here. So I just need to put pins and a connector on these wires here, and then that will be all good to go. Now I still need to bench bleed the master, but on the side of the master cylinder, or the side of the reservoir rather, it lists use only DOT3 brake fluid, and all I have right here is DOT4. So I'm sure it wouldn't make that big of a difference, but I'm just going to wait. I waited this long to have brakes on the car. I can wait another few days and I'll get actual DOT3 fluid, and I can bench bleed that and get all of the braking system with pressure, and all be well that way. So I have the actual rod here, and I was able to scavenge this portion of the clevis and the jam nut right there off of the old master cylinder, the old booster. So I'll have to get that adjusted, get it all set to the appropriate length, but again, that will not be a job for today. That will be in the not too distant future. But that'll be about it for the Supra today. And like I said, it was a long, frustrating day. Every single one of these straight hose ends that I used ended up stripping out, and I don't believe it was anything that I was doing incorrect. I think it was just a quality control issue, and one of them actually ended up taking an airborne ride somewhere in that direction over there in the shop. And I usually try to keep my cool as much as I can, but it was very frustrating, and I got it out of my system now. But all that being said, we have an interesting project in the shop that will be featured in upcoming videos, and it's actually a repeat customer, pun obviously intended. So right there, if you guys remember when I had Jared's blue SRT4 in the shop, this is what it looks like now. So he has the wide front end on it, has carbon doors for it, And if you look and see, he's been doing quite a bit of surgery on this thing. There's the whole back portion of it cut out that I'm assuming he's going to either put new sheet metal in or carbon fiber or something along those lines. But he has been hard at work on this thing, and the most interesting part about it, and frankly why it is back here in the first place, is he has changed cylinder heads and gone with a 420A head. So what that means is on an SRT4, typically the intake and exhaust side are backwards from like a B series Honda. So the exhaust is on the firewall side, the intake is on the bow side, or the foremost side of the engine bay. Now the 420 head, it flips that 180 degrees. Intake is on the firewall side, exhaust is on the bow side, and uses a different head flange. Everything is different with it, so his old setup was not going to work. But we are going to do a really neat, really cool turbo setup with this thing, and it will all be based around this right here, which is a 6785 rather. He also has a nice sport front intercooler from Speed Factory. He has one of their little radiators there as well, and has a number of other parts that he'll be bringing out in the next few days. So this will be the next big non-Supra build featured on the channel, and I cannot wait to dig into it, show you guys what's going on, take you all along for the ride, and this will be a really cool and really neat one. But I am done for the day. I'm done sweating, done being frustrated, done with everything else, and I'm going to get out of here for the day. So again, brake lines are all knocked out, and I'll have to repair one brake line in the rear of the car that I nicked with an angle grinder when I was cutting the rear sheet metal out, but I'll fix that off camera, get that all knocked out and squared away, and then this thing will be ready for brake fluid, and we'll have brakes at that point. So another huge thing checked off, and the next order of business with it will be getting the alternator working. So I need to build a tensioner, which I have this guy right here that I ordered from McMaster Car. This is an M10 Heim joint turnbuckle, which will go over how this works in an upcoming video, probably the next one that we're working on this thing. And we'll get that knocked out, and at that point in time it should be self-sustaining from an electrical perspective. All the brakes will be working, and it should be able to putter it up and down the driveway if I would want to, but that'll be a later date. Today we are done, and I'm done rambling on. So thank you all for watching, for tuning in, coming along on this crazy journey, watching me sweat today, and I look forward to taking you guys along for the ride with everything else that we have coming up in the not too distant future. But that will be that, and we are done for today. So as always, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and I will see you guys in the next episode.